Hello everybody, I'm Best Guy and welcome to Best Top 5. Today we're talking about the top 5 horror movies of the decade. Just to be sure, so people won't get confused, we're mentioning the movies from 2010 to 2017. There's a lot of great horror movies that have been released during that time. For number 5, I know a lot of people are going to say, what the hell are you talking about, Best Guy? This movie's awful. This movie's not scary. What the fuck is wrong with you? But I am mentioning a movie that I genuinely really enjoyed, and that movie is Tusk, directed by Kevin Smith. This movie is absurd, yes, it's ridiculous, but it's original. It's not based on anything else. It's not a sequel or remake. It's an original idea that started because of a podcast with Kevin Smith where he just said, you know what, let's do a story about this. Guy who gets turned into a walrus. It sounds ridiculous, I get it, but it's so fun. It mixes horror with comedy in a genuine way where I'm like, this is fun, I don't have any problems with this, and I can't compare it to anything else I've ever seen. And by that measure alone, it's one of the best horror movies of this decade. Many will disagree, I get it. You know, we'll probably put another movie here. We'll probably put Twilight or something. Well, then, fuck you, it's not Twilight, it's Tusk. Number 4, we have a remake. This is probably the only remake I can think of this decade. There's other remakes that have actually surpassed the original, remakes like The Fly, or remakes like Scarface. But this remake, modern remake, is actually, I wouldn't say it's better than the original, but it's actually completely different from the original. And that movie is The Evil Dead. Evil Dead is so good. It's very gory. It's actually so much gorier than the original. And the original is more of a horror comedy, and this is legitimately just straight up horror. And I enjoy this movie. It's scary, it's gory, it's so well done. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's been out for a few years now. And the reason why it gets to number 4 is because every scene in this movie is, I can't compare it to other horror movies of this decade. Most horror movies of this decade, in terms of being like commercial, like being big commercial movies, they aren't as gory as this. You know, back in the 80s, this was common. You see a lot of horror movies, you know, that were so over the top. And this one does it in a way where it's not goofy. It's actually pretty gross. So that's why it reaches my number 4 on this list. For number 3, we have a movie that it's kind of divisive. There's some people who really liked it. And I notice usually people who are fans of horror movies, who grew up watching horror movies, you know, who love movies from the 80s and 90s, and, you know, good horror movies, they'll like this movie. But then there's other people who are casual viewers who don't like this movie. I've met a lot of people who tell me, like, what's wrong with you? I don't even trust your taste in movies anymore because you like this movie. And that movie is Cabin in the Woods. Back in 2012, I went to the movie theater, and I was like, you know what? There was only 2 other movies. I think there was, it was either this movie or Battleship or some other movie. I don't remember. But I had to choose between the 2. It's like, you know, Cabin in the Woods, I don't even know what that's about. Just go watch it. So I sat down and I went with a date, and we both were like, damn, this is really good. I wouldn't say it's a parody, but it's kind of like referencing every other horror trope that's been in horror movies since the beginning of time. And it does it in a charming way where you're both, I don't want to say scared, but you're both like jumping in the edge of your seat and you're laughing. And there's just so many reactions that you get from a lot of scenes in Cabin in the Woods. But basically the story is a bunch of kids going to Cabin in the Woods, and there's scientists behind the scenes who are releasing these pheromones and things to the kids so they can react and behave like dumb kids like they do in most horror movies where they make stupid decisions. But it makes sense in this movie. Everything is brought together, and then the ending where you see all these monsters and characters from other movies that you recognize, even though they don't have names here, but you can recognize, you're like, this is great. And it's definitely a movie that I watched several times. I have it on Blu-ray. But I know people who don't like it, and it's fine. I get it. You know, it's not a movie for mainstream viewers. It's a movie for people who get horror movies and they want to see a parody, so to speak, done right. So for number 2, this is a little bit difficult because, honestly, like I originally had this as number 1, but then another movie came out this year that topped it off, and number 2 came out last year. It's from the same director of The Evil Dead, and that movie is Don't Breathe. Great movie. This movie really is really well done. And the story is basically a group of kids are planning to steal money from a guy who's blind, who's a veteran, and little do they know that this guy knows his stuff. Like, he knows how to defend himself. And every scene in this movie had me on the edge of my seat. I was legitimately like scared and like on the edge of my seat on every single sequence in this movie. That's how scary it was. The other thing I can tell you about Don't Breathe, and sure, there's certain scenes that are a little like cliche here and there, but everything that happens like midway all the way to the end, especially the end, I wasn't expecting that. Like, again, I can't think of another horror movie within the last 10 years that literally has done something like that. Like, when you think this movie's going to go in one direction, nope. It goes somewhere else completely different. But there was a movie that was actually better than this, believe it or not, and that movie is Get Out. Released this year, directed by Jordan Peele. At first, I remember seeing the trailer, and I was like, this looks good. But at the same time, I was thinking, you know what? There's a lot of trailers that look good and end up being a bad movie, and there's bad trailers that end up being a good movie. But this was actually a trailer done right, because you watch the trailer, and it doesn't really reveal anything. It's just showing you a couple of scenes, and that's it. And then you watch the movie, and you're like, wow, this was so good. The story in Get Out is a young kid who's African-American. He's going out with this young Caucasian girl, and he's going to meet their parents. It's not like Meet the Parents, but this is like Meet the Parents gone like horror. You know, he meets them and he finds out that these are really like crazy people. And I don't want to reveal anything about what happens, but let's just say that there's racism sort of involved and social commentary that this movie is going to be very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's going to be, not controversial, but I would say it's going to be contemporary for a long time, because it's going to be timeless for a long time, I think so, because it touches on a lot of issues that we have today, but it does it in a way where it isn't preachy. It's still a movie. It's not trying to like be like telling you like, oh, this is what's happening now. No, it's just a movie. The explanation you get at the end, it's really well done. There's an alternate version which has a different type of ending that is more of a social commentary, and I didn't like that ending that much. And even Jordan Peele himself said that I had to change that ending because this is just a movie. So I hope you enjoyed this list. This was my top 5 best horror movies of the decade. If there's any movie that I didn't mention on this list that you think should have been, please let me know. Leave on the comment section down below. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe. I'm Vest Guy, and this was Vest Top 5. And remember, it comes from the deep down. It comes from the undertow.